Boole was very early in sort of the history. If you look at the history of automated reasoning, he was on the very early side, but many of those who came after him built on his work, and especially I think the way he was thinking about things was very ahead of his time. Thinking about how do we mechanize this process of reasoning? How do we put it on a solid foundation? And even how do we do reasoning by manipulating symbols? That was a very new idea, and of course, absolutely fundamental to automated reasoning and the success that we're having there today. It's really hard for us to imagine the circumstances at that time. The early 1800s. What kind of formalism did he even have to work with? He was basically building the very first foundations from which everything else could grow. And Claude Shannon recognized the importance of his work when he built all of his infrastructure, all of his foundations about information theory. So there's that connection, which is of course fundamental. But then also, just the idea that you can turn something as simple as true and false into a system that can be reasoned about, I think was very prescient, especially when you consider that the Boolean satisfiability problem was the first NP-complete problem. Now, what I think is fascinating about that was a very important theoretical result, but it's turned out to be a very important practical result as well. People used to say, well, if we can solve SAT, we can solve all these other problems as kind of a theoretical construct. But it has become a practical construct. There are many real-world applications now that people say, oh, okay, we know how to translate this into a SAT problem. We have fast satisfiability solvers. Now we can solve the problem. So this idea of Boolean logic became a fundamental cornerstone in sort of algorithmic complexity and has now become an important cornerstone in actual practical applications. The thing that was waiting to be discovered is that most SAT problems that come from the real world have a kind of a structure to them. And the structure means there's a short proof. And so you just have to find the short proof. And so what the way the heuristics work is they just very quickly are able to, it's a sophisticated way to very quickly explore sort of all the short proofs that there are, because you cut off large portions of the search space every time you find a conflict. So you're learning to avoid searching things that aren't going to help. But you also restart very frequently and do random shifts here and there, so that it's almost like some of these stochastic methods, but it still ends up being complete, which is nice. So yeah, you get to try everything you can very quickly, and you get to cut off lots and lots of parts of the space. And so if there is a short proof, then you find it. I think that we all build on the shoulders of those who came before us. So in that sense, every new development is influenced by this whole chain of events that goes all the way back to Boole. We are nowhere close to the end of that chain. In fact, this revolution in satisfiability, I think, is very early still. I think we're seeing dramatic advances in SAT and SMT every year. I think there's still a lot of people who have not yet been exposed to these ideas, whose applications could benefit. I wrote a survey paper about SMT, and one of the things I discovered was several interesting application areas where people took the best tools in that area, and then they tried translating the problem to SAT or SMT, and frequently the SAT or SMT solver was better. So I think what we have yet to see is the impact that will come as these ideas spread and more areas, outside of the core computer science areas, discover that there are these general reasoning mechanisms that actually work quite well. Boole was one of the first of many philosophers and mathematicians who had this idea of mechanized reasoning. Others were Leibniz, who said, if we could just formalize all of this, then we would never have to have a debate again. We would just sit down and say, let us calculate, right? And then there was, Hilbert, who had the Entscheidungsproblem, which he said was the most fundamental problem of mathematical logic. Given this formula, is it possible to find a solution automatically? Now, of course, Church and Turing showed that it's not possible in general, and I think that was a big disappointment. And for many years, I think it sort of slowed down the progress. But I think with the new interest and the new success of satisfiability methods, what we're seeing is these dreams of Turing and Hilbert and Boole are being realized in practice. And I think, like I said before, that we've just scratched the surface. And what's very exciting to me will be to see what can we do as automated reasoning becomes commonplace, as people know and understand that they can take any problem that's interesting and translate it into a formalism, and in many cases have that solved automatically. I think the applications are immense. These techniques have been used in industry, they've been used by academics to find security vulnerabilities, to find bugs, to find all kinds of problems. And so this is really becoming a very powerful tool for improving the quality of software. And I think this is, very important as software becomes more and more prevalent and more safety critical. It's not just software. This is being used in hardware as well. And one of the great innovations, I think, in improving the quality of hardware, which is every bit as important and critical for safety and security, is being able to quickly and automatically check for design errors in hardware. And I would say that in hardware, the adoption of these techniques, SAT solvers and the like, is even more prevalent than it is for software right now. So all these techniques based on Boolean reasoning, Boolean algebra, Boolean satisfiability, they are becoming industry standard. They're becoming critical to sort of, to society being able to continue this march into the digital age.